I've heard a few commentators brag up the SEC as if it's the toughest conference for women's basketball. But this conference is clearly not the toughest. South Carolina is the best team in the nation. LSU is the only other ranked team in this conference. And then, who else? Ole Miss and Tennessee has done alright in conference play up to this point. Being formally ranked, both these teams, it does make sense for them to be doing well. But still, these teams aren't likely beating the SEC's two best. The same can be said for Mississippi State, Auburn, Alabama, Vanderbilt, and Texas A&M. Unless LSU or South Carolina have a bad game, none of these teams are realistically beating them on average. With that being said, this conference mainly has two teams that are likely SEC champions and potential Final Four candidates. The belief is that South Carolina and LSU will rematch during the conference championship, and LSU at best can be co-SEC champions, being that the Gamecocks already have a share of the title. With the Gamecocks, one can make a case that this team's competition hasn't been as good as advertised. You could say Notre Dame was without Olivia Miles, and even if she played, it may not have made much of a difference. Maryland was severely overestimated, being that they haven't been ranked for most of the season. The Tar Heels' really good outing was just a bad game for South Carolina, being that UNC is no longer ranked. Utah hasn't been that consistent all year. LSU is not exactly living up to the hype of being this unstoppable juggernaut. UConn was just too injured to put up a good fight, and the SEC doesn't produce enough rankable teams to keep them on their toes. Now, it's not a knock on the Gamecocks if teams aren't meeting their expectations for the year. This team still goes out and get wins, and it looks good for South Carolina regardless if the win is pretty or not. It really is a tale of two teams when it comes down to the Tigers. Which LSU team is going to show up is always the question. Will it be the one team that leans into their strengths to compensate for all their weaknesses? Or will it be the LSU team that struggles to get past their shortcomings and ultimately gas themselves out down the stretch? This team's problems are so often discussed that it'll be like beating a dead horse to even mention them at this point, so I'll spare everyone. One thing for sure is, their problems have no real solution, so they're just things they'll always have to work around. Now, I feel that both LSU and South Carolina have a good chance of winning the national title, but I just feel the Gamecocks' chances are more favorable than LSU's. South Carolina is just far better at in-game adjustments, and they're going to need that throughout the tournament. LSU is a team that could very well drop an easy one, especially if that team prepares for them well enough. If sheer talent can't get the Tigers over the hump, then they're likely losing. However, if they play hot during the tournament, sky's the limit. With that being said, South Carolina is for sure my Final Four pick, and LSU has as good of a chance as any to reach the Final Four, but I'm not locking them into that. I think they faltered during the Elite Eight matchups, but that's just my guess. I'm just a guy with an opinion sharing it with others, and you can agree or disagree. At the end of the day, it's about the discussion, and dialogue towards women's basketball is always a good thing.